started working in corporate Canada back when computers were just coming into the corporate world. I was a recent graduate where my entire math degree was based on computers. And so it ended up that a lot of the work I did in the first 14 years of my career was focused on putting in new automation to services that were provided by a corporate office. So pension services, strategic planning services, data services, all that sort of thing. And after 14 years in a mining company doing this kind of work, I left there and went to work for IBM as a management consultant, where I was trained all over the world, learned how to do this with all kinds of different clients, and really enjoyed not only the work of a management consultant, but also developing a team of management consultants and being responsible for their sales and their targets and goals and achievements for the year. So after a few years at IBM, I led a significant proposal for them. It took about 3.5 years to get to the proposal through. It was a $200 million piece of work with international partners as well as domestic partners. So that was a great experience for me and a launch pad to take me into, what my next new world would look like. And so when I left IBM after that proposal preparation, I went back into business for myself as a consultant, landed a couple of interesting pieces of work across Canada, and then decided to join the innovation ecosystem. I joined one organization that ran an international program to bring students to Canada, expose them to Canadian academic institutions in the hopes that they would come and stay here, therefore impacting our innovation score globally. And after I managed that project and ran it from 17-person pilot to a program that could handle 1,200 students in a year, the next role for me was in an organization based in Ontario, focused on helping startup companies in the Ontario ecosystem to succeed and to grow. And my role there was around building partnerships among corporations and government to deliver interesting new projects. So one of those was around bringing 5G capability to the technology ecosystem in Ontario before 5G was even available here. Startups could go and create applications of products on a 5G network. So that was very interesting. And when I left there, I've gone on again to start my own consulting firm, and I'm doing some very interesting work now in the areas of public transit and electronic vehicles and just leadership capabilities. So it's a fun ride. I think in my career, a number of times I've specifically sought to bring in a consultant for a couple of reasons. One is that consultants work with a large number of other clients, so they see what's happening in the world out there that you may not have access to. So maybe it's companies in your sector, maybe it's not. But either way, they just have a depth of expertise that you're not normally going to have in your own staff base. So I think they really bring in that arm's length perspective of what's happening in the world. The second thing that I really value about consultants is it's their job to give you the straight goods. So they will tell you things that your team won't tell you. They will tell you what's happening outside of your office. They'll give you that lens into what's happening around you, what your competitors are doing, what your staff is doing, and I think you make better decisions because of that kind of insight. So when I look to bring in consultants, I do it for that reason. I think it's really an interesting conversation to have about the path of development of an organization. So when you're looking at an early stage startup, there's a few people who have come together to create a new product or service that they're taking to the market. And the initial few years for them are generally focused in two areas. And one is on the excellence of their product or their service, and really crafting it to the point that it's going to do whatever it is that they want it to be doing. And so there's a lot of, particularly in technology firms, there's a lot of time and effort spent on making sure that the technology is functioning properly before you ever go to a customer. And then, of course, once they go to a customer and say, take a look at my neat new product, the customer is giving them feedback that's constantly changing that product. So there's a lot of work and effort in those early stages around the product and on the side of funding, because any new company needs funding to keep operating properly. And so as they're hiring more and more people, they need to have the funding to be able to do that. And so there's always a part of the company that's out there looking for, whether it's venture capital funding, angel funding, government grants, whatever the sources of funding are that are available. That's sort of the second arm of what's happening in an early stage company. At that stage, they're looking for advisors. They're looking for people who can help them better understand the technology, better understand how do you pitch, how do I present my company to somebody who might have money, how do I write a grant to make sure that the government program I'm applying to is actually going to send me the money. So there's that kind of advisory services is prevalent with early stage companies, and probably not for payment because they don't have funding. So they usually don't have a whole lot of money to be able to pay you as an advisor. However, they'll pay you in stock, right? So they'll give you some portion of the company for the time that you spend with them. As the company matures, then they grow, they have more funding at their disposal, and their emphasis starts to change from creating one good product to either creating many more products or creating a product that can go to many more markets. So that at that point, they start to look at, the sorts of things that are going to allow the product to grow. But in the process, their organization is also growing. And so they get to the point, when you're about 20, 25 people in size, you can't really do that on the back of an envelope anymore. You need human resource policies. You need, travel policies. You need expense policies. You need to start putting some structures in place on how people are expected to work together and how the culture of your organization is going to get built. So at that point, you start to bring in consultants to do this kind of work where it's more hands-on and it's more helping you build some structure into your company. And of course, as the company grows, it continues to expand. It gets more and more funding and customers and that sort of thing. Then the role of the consultant, it becomes more and more specific, where there's a specific project or a specific issue that you need dealt with, and you want to bring in that external expertise to the table. So I think it's really a conversation about what stage is the company at and what kind of services do they need you to provide. Because as they get more and more mature, sometimes people will bring in advisors, paid advisors, to a more mature company to advise on a specific topic. So what do I do about labor law in this country? What do I do about, financial structures? So those are more advisory kind of roles, but they're the sophisticated, larger company kind of conversations that you want to be having compared to the advisors for a startup. So I think sometimes we use the term, advisor, consultant interchangeably for all of us that are doing this kind of work. I do think that they're specific in different roles, though. I don't think there is a point where of course I'm a consultant, so you're going to say that. I don't think there is a point where you no longer need a consultant, but I think the kind of consultant that you need changes. So, the role that I would play as a COO or a fractional COO for a firm is very different if you're a firm of, 300 people. Maybe the kind of operations work that you need is about getting, the functional roles to work together on something, or it's about, creating a new functional role or creating a new layer in the organization, which is quite different from what I would do with, somebody that's got a smaller organization with maybe 50 people in it. And in that case, you need me to come in and help with, structuring, a process, or structuring a policy, or, advising on a particular pathway for a project to proceed. It's quite different in terms of the role that I play, but I do think that there are times in every organization where having that deeper expertise, external perspective, and a more global vision is helpful to an organization in your development. So I think it's a matter of what are you bringing them in to do, and being very clear with yourself on why that external perspective is useful. A lot of times people bring in a consultant just as a spare pair of hands, and honestly, I don't think you get a lot of value for that. Unless, of course, the consultant is billing themselves out as an extra pair of hands. I'm a project manager, that's all I do, and here's the kind of consulting I want to do, then that's fine. But generally speaking, I think what you're looking for is for somebody who's got that broader set of experience that you wouldn't necessarily expect to find in one of your staff members. I think there's a couple of key things, and here I'll speak from my perspective as a chief operating officer, because at that level, I'm working with the CEO and I'm working with her team, and so at that point, you need to be able to trust me. I have to be trustworthy. I have to maintain confidentiality. I need to be able to talk to the CEO, find out what the issue is in its full glory, and go about doing my work without, blabbing that around the rest of the firm. So I think there's a trust factor that for me is probably number one in terms of working with somebody at this level. And I think the second thing that's related is a high degree of political acuity. So what I mean when I say that is you need to be able to put me in any situation and trust that I'm going to behave appropriately. If I'm in front of a staff member, if I'm in front of a peer, one of the other executives, if I'm in front of a partner, if I'm in front of a government funder, and if I'm in front of a newscaster, how am I behaving? What am I saying? What am I doing? Am I able to do that appropriately for you? I think those two factors are really important. And I think a third that I would add to that is the need to be a really strong communicator. What I find a lot of times in senior roles is that things have been developed or talked about or brought together, and they're confusing. People don't understand it. It doesn't make sense, or it's contradictory. And being able to clarify all of that messaging into a very succinct and logical story of what is it that we're going to do and why is it that we're going to do it is really important. And if you can do that verbally, where you can present it to staff, to teams, with a great deal of confidence, I think it's important. I also think it's important in written form. So if you're writing policies or procedures or manuals or any communication really with the inside team or with external partners, it's important that your communication skills be top-notch for that to work effectively. So those would be the three things I would focus on. You have to be able to trust me. You have to know that I have a high level of political acuity, and you need to be confident that I'm a very strong communicator to be able to get my work done. I think my best piece of advice would be to really get your story straight. It took me a long time to get my elevator pitch honed to the point that I could use it. I had a lot of different things I could do. What I had to do was focus in on the things I wanted to do and be able to tell that story effectively. So today, when I say I'm a CEO's right hand, I can almost stop there. People understand what I mean. If I have time, I can carry on to say, I'm here to get stuff done that the CEO or their executive team have not been able to accomplish. And you can go to more and more detail according to the time you have. But it took me a very long time to get that message honed down. So I would encourage a newcomer to the consulting world to really be clear on what kind of work do you want somebody to hire you to do, because that's what they're going to ask you. So what do you do? I do this. How could I use you? What kind of problem are you solving for me? Is kind of the second part of that question. And I think the more clarity that you can get around those 2 points, the easier it is to explain yourself to somebody and either agree early on that there's nothing there for you to do, or to identify early on that there is something you could do together and be able to dig into that.